Hey team, this is Annie. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the instructional design process that we use at online learning. So let's take in and digest what we're seeing on the screen. So we have an infographic with the title, The Instructional Design Process. Be aware that instructional design is often referred to as ID. So if I use that term going forward in this video, just know I'm referencing instructional design, okay? This infographic is broken up into 4 sections. We have discover, define, develop, and then deliver at the end. And these are to segment the 2 different diamonds that you're seeing on the screen. We call these diamonds the double diamond method. This is a method we use in instructional design process. There's other methods you might have heard of, such as design thinking, as well as the ADDIE model. However, all of these different methods are used to separate the different steps that you take throughout the instructional design process. And it's to help us be a little bit more thorough and rigorous in developing our products. So on this far left-hand side, as you can see, it says don't know, could be, and on the opposite side, do know, should be. This is illustrating that at the beginning of the process, we don't really know what type of product we're developing, who we're developing it for, or why we're developing it in the first place. But by the end of the process, we do know what we need to develop, we have a fully functioning product, and we've defined the learning objectives as well as we know what the users need, okay? So let's go back to these 4 different sections. I'm just going to give a brief overview of what's happening within each of these different sections. So in the discover phase, we want to understand the problem by speaking to people who are affected by the problem. So in this first diamond, you'll see there's stakeholder meeting, defining learning objectives, and doing some research. That's the discover phase. Again, we're trying to identify a problem and talking to people who are affected by it. In the first diamond, we then have the define phase. This phase, we're going to use the insights that we got from the discover phase to try to define and illustrate what challenges our users are facing and what challenges that we need to address with our product. So then we make our way to the next diamond and we start with the develop phase. This phase we're going to co-design with other people on the team, and we're meant to start designing and developing the product that is addressing the challenges our users are facing, okay? And then finally, deliver phase in this last portion of the second diamond is to test our solutions on a small scale, and we reject the solutions that are not solving the problem. So this develop and delivery phase is pretty cyclical. It's not a linear process. None of this is linear. Know that you can move back and forth in between these different sections in the double diamond. All right, so let's start at don't know, could be with the stakeholder meeting. I'm going to walk through this first diamond, and then I'm going to stop the video. I want you to take it in, and then we'll start talking about the second diamond in a little bit. So again, let's start on the don't know, could be. We're going to talk about stakeholder meetings. On this Notion page the video is on the right-hand side of the Notion, you should see the 4 different sections listed: discover, define, develop, and deliver. Those are toggles. So if you click into them, there should be information that pops up, and you can find the stakeholder section and follow along as I talk about it. A stakeholder, defined, is someone that you're working with on the project who has say on the development of it, as well as the person you're going to be reporting your progress to. So let me give an example. I work on projects for the library and Writing 150 class, and so oftentimes the projects I'm working on, my stakeholders are librarians, as well as Writing 150 faculty members, and then my supervisor for the team, who's Matt Armstrong. So all of those individuals would be considered my stakeholders. If I was starting a new project in the stakeholder meeting, this is the first thing I would do, is I would request for a meeting with everybody. We would come together and we would define the scope of the project. Scope just means the logistics for the project. So how long I have to work on the project, when it's due, what the budget is for the project. Like, am I going to need funds to do interviews or to test my product? What are the learning objectives potentially? Who's the audience? Is the project and product I'm developing for students? Is it for faculty members? If it's for students, what type of students? Writing 150 students, library students, students just at BYU, so is it more of a general population? So again, the stakeholder meeting is a meeting that you bring everybody together and you're asking key questions to set you up for success. The next triangle you'll see is to define learning objectives. You can do this in the stakeholder meeting, but I prefer to gather all that information in the stakeholder meeting and then come away on my own and define and brainstorm some learning objectives. If I do this on my own, I'm going to want to make sure that I send them to the stakeholders and say, hey, based on the information that we've talked about and gathered, here are the learning objectives that I think fit the needs of the users and the project. Do these work? And do you approve them? Obviously, we're going to want to check back in with our stakeholders throughout this entire process because they really are the ones who are going to be giving us the, okay, this is a good product at the end. So the next thing that we're going to do in this discover phase is we're going to conduct some research. This can be primary research or secondary research. In the instructional design process, you're most likely not going to be conducting primary research, which means you would be sitting down for interviews or sending out surveys. You'd be doing in-depth, rigorous research. Oftentimes, that type of research is its own study in itself, but you can use interviews or things to guide your future product process. But a lot of times, mostly instructional designers will be doing secondary research. This means you'd be getting on to websites, or you'd be reading articles, books, looking at infographics to give you background information on your product or the topics that you're going to be developing, things like that, okay? So again, this discover phase is to try to identify the problem, the scope of the project. We're discovering things. Now we're going to move on to the define portion of this first diamond. We're going to start by identifying themes. This just means that when we were conducting research, whether primary or secondary, we want to look for patterns or repetitive words or things that were mentioned. So if I conducted interviews for primary research, maybe there were many participants who were speaking about a topic. Or if I was doing secondary research, in the literature I was reading, perhaps I saw some themes emerge, some patterns emerging. I'm going to want to make sure that I identify those things because that just means that that might be an important point to consider for my product going forward. Then we're going to analyze the data. This is pretty similar to identifying themes, but it just means you're going to be a little bit more rigorous in the data. You're really going to get familiar with what the research is saying, which is also going to help you deduce opportunity areas. So if we jump forward and we look at this second diamond, we're going to start to develop the product in that phase. Before we do that, though, we want to understand where there are opportunity areas. So we've talked about the problem, but now we want to think about how can I solve that problem? What opportunities are available for me to be able to solve those problems and the challenges that the stakeholders listed out? Then we want to form some questions. Before we move on to that second diamond, we want to ask questions like, what form is this product going to be? So maybe the product is a learning module or a homework assignment. Perhaps it's a website. Maybe it's an infographic or a video. That's maybe one question we want to ask. The other thing is who am I going to show this product to test it? Another question might be, Are my stakeholders aware of where I'm at in the instructional design process? So by the end of this first diamond, we've discovered some things, then we've defined what our problem is, what things we need to be aware of, what patterns we saw in our research, and we're going to end it off with some questions that are going to set us up to start the second diamond in the ID process, okay? I know I just covered a lot, so go ahead and take a deep breath. I'm going to end the video here, and then we'll pick back up with the second diamond, the develop phase and delivery phase. All right, let's dive into the second diamond. Hopefully you were able to take a break and a breath, but let's jump right back in. Okay, so we're on the second diamond. We're going to talk about the develop and deliver phase. So again, to review, the develop phase is where we're going to co-design a product with members of our team as well as our users, and we're going to develop and test it, all right? So this first section, Ideate, I'm sure you know what that means, but Ideate just means to brainstorm ideas, to wireframe. Wireframing means that you're drawing out the product, you're writing down some of the content, you're just brainstorming, all right? Once we have some initial brainstorm things or a developed graphics or curriculum, we're gonna do rapid prototyping. This is an essential thing to be familiar with as an instructional designer, or even a UX UI designer. Any designer needs to know how to do rapid prototyping. So let's go ahead and define what that means. To rapid prototype means that you've brainstormed ideas, but then you have an actual minimal viable product. And that means that you have an idea of what your product is going to look like, but it's not fully developed. It's really raw and bare boned. And you take that and you go to your users and you say, hey, this is what the product might look like. What do you think about it? Is it effective? And then you listen to what they're saying about it, and you're going to start adjusting it. Then you're going to repeat that process. So rapid prototyping means you're just getting ideas out there, you're drawing curriculum, you're developing infographics, and then you're presenting it to your users and then iterating along the way. Okay? Then we're going to move on to these second triangles within the second diamond, and they're the same. So we're going to define ideas, design vision, or design a hypothesis. Okay, so whatever one of those fits for the product you're developing. So we've done some brainstorming, we've tested a minimal viable product, and we're consistently developing the prototype. But then once we have an idea of where the prototype should end, we're going to try to, again, list out our key ideas or our design vision. So this could be as simple as writing out a paragraph that says, by the end of this product, I want it to do X, Y, or Z. I want it to meet these users' needs, right? So that was the development phase. Now we're getting into the delivery phase. But before we deliver the product, we want to ensure that what we've designed is really meeting the needs of the users, okay? And so as we move into the second portion of delivery, we're going to go through prototype and test, which is similar to rapid prototyping. But this prototype that we're testing in this section of delivery, it's not a minimal viable product anymore. So this means that we really have put efforts into the product. So say that I'm designing an app. In rapid prototyping, I just have wireframes, which means drawings of what the app could look like. But in this delivery phase where we're doing the prototype and test, this app might be actually on my phone, and it could be designed on Figma, and I can actually click it. So it just means that it's a higher quality prototype that I'm going to actually sit down with my user and my stakeholder and say, this is what we have, I'm going to test it. Now, to test it means you might set up like a task analysis where you ask them to accomplish something on the product, or you ask them to take the homework module or learning module you just designed and then get feedback about it. All right. The next thing is you're going to analyze, iterate, and repeat. So once you've tested the prototype, you're going to analyze what you saw, what your users said, and then you're going to repeat that process. And as you can see, there's this circle here with arrows. This just means that this section is very iterative. It's not a linear process. You're going to prototype, test, iterate, prototype, iterate, test. It just means you're going back and forth between these different steps, okay? Once you have a prototype in a phase where you've adjusted it based on all of the feedback you've gotten and you feel confident that it's a good product and it's meeting the needs of the users, then you're actually going to spend a significant amount of time building it out. So you're putting a lot of effort into refining it and polishing it so it looks good, okay? I'm going to stop right there because I also want to emphasize that, again, throughout all this process, prototyping and iterating, every iteration, you want to make sure that you're updating your stakeholder to let them know where you're at in the product development lifecycle, okay? So I've been talking a lot about designing an app or infographics or graphics, which is part of the instructional design, but sometimes it might be just content, like written content. And you can still do the same thing. Testing might look a little bit different there, but if I was writing a course and needed to test the content, I could still sit down with the users and have them read it and say, what do you think about this? And also, the testing might just be with the stakeholders because they are really the subject matter experts. And so you want to make sure that if it is written content, that they're giving the okay. Then finally, the last thing I'm going to do in this double diamond is to distribute it. To distribute just means I'm going to deliver it to my users, I'm going to give it to my stakeholders, and report on the entire process. So another thing before I let you go that I want to talk about is, as you can see on each of these diamonds, we have diverging and converging. So what does this mean? So diverging means that I'm getting bigger. So if you can imagine like a cone where it's getting wider as it goes out, that's what diverging means. So you're asking questions, you're discovering new things, it's getting bigger, but then you're going to come back in when it's converging and you're going to narrow in your focus because you've discovered much, but then you've defined what you're trying to get at. So that's just what diverging and converging means. So as you go through these different processes on each of the diamonds, you're learning something, but then you're defining something and building it, okay? I hope this was helpful. I know that was probably a lot, but just the more that you practice this process, the more familiar it will be and the more confident you'll be going into other projects. If you have any questions, again, reference the Notion page, but I'm still here on the team. I don't know at what point you'll be watching this video. You can always reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn, but I hope that was helpful, guys. Good luck in all your projects.